My friends? What is happening? What is going on? Welcome to another great episode of the Arrington Gavin podcast, presented by Rugged Evolution Beard Care. Rugged is the new smooth. Look, guys, so excited to have you on this great Monday. Again, coming with you new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time via podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from, whether if it's iHeart, Spotify, Apple, hey, you name it, you can find us on there. Also, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via YouTube. Our YouTube channel is R Smooth Club Media. R Smooth Club Media. Truly appreciate all the people that subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a comment, like all that great stuff. You can also tune in on our Facebook page, our Smooth Club Podcast, as well as X, formerly known as Twitter. I'm gonna keep on saying formerly known as Twitter because I feel like I can never get used to just X. It's a one letter. Gosh, I just X. I'm sending out some X's. Just it sounds so weird. So anyway, guys, you know how I enjoy discussing politics with you all. A little bit about me. I've said in the beginning, I want to make sure we're all informed on everything, what's happening in your community, in your backyard is very much needed to have the knowledge of your local politics, state politics. We all can, hear about national politics on the news, and we think that's like the most important thing, but really it's what happens in your backyard in your own state. So very excited because I started a small series while this election season, getting in contact with some of my good friends who work within, in politics, whether they're candidates, current officials, people that work behind the scenes. I want to get their insight, and we also, we get their insight on both sides of the aisle because, hey, like I've always mentioned, guys, I'm a middle guy. I don't run with the herd, so I have friends from all different sides. So if you don't like it, well, don't watch it, but please do watch it because I like having the views and subscribe. So yeah, please watch it. But seriously, like we have to realize, guys, we live in a universal world. So at the end of the day, we have to respect others' opinions. I just wish the world would encourage that more because I do see a lot of division right now. But again, respect others' opinions. And look, we all don't have to agree with each other, but we all have to, enjoy each other's company and all that good stuff. So look, enough with all that. I'm excited to have on a gentleman who has a strong passion, so much of a passion. He is running for office, right? And I always tell people, why the hell do you want to run for office? Ugh. It's like, it's because politics can be kind of cutthroat, right? But I'm very excited because he's an awesome dude. And also he's a fellow bearded brother. Yes. That's also why he's one of my favorite people, because he has a beard. Yes, I said it. If you don't have a beard, I don't like you. No, I'm joking. I'm not being discriminatory if you don't have a beard. But I have Mr. Jeremy Rodden on with us. He is the candidate. He's running for a House of Delegates District 90th over in the state of in my hometown in Virginia, mostly representing the Chesapeake area, but I believe he has some other parts that he'll cover, which we'll talk with him on. He is an author, a publisher, an educator, and just all around, hey, great family man that has, that sees something that needs to be done, and he's taking initiative with that by running. So without further ado, y'all, I'm going to introduce Mr. Jeremy Rodden. Jeremy, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, Arrington, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Look, I hope I did that intro justice. I always have to let people know, like, hey, look, I usually like to go off the top of the dome. I do my homework as well, but I always want to, make sure I did not leave anything out. So were you satisfied with that intro?
No, you actually covered everything pretty well. The only thing is that District 90 is actually the only House of Delegates district that is entirely comprised inside Chesapeake. So the district I am running for does not share with anybody else, which I like because that allows me as a delegate to focus on the needs of my city, and without any type of conflicting type of stuff, and that's yeah. So that's it's the only one that's entirely. There's 5 districts that have parts of Chesapeake, but 90
Gotcha.
is 100% inside Chesapeake.
Also, look, I truly appreciate, man, for correcting me on that. Because again, this show is all about having some fun, refreshing, but also being informative. So thank you so much for that correction. Jeremy, before I get going, as far as some more questions I want to ask you, tell the folks a little bit about yourself. Give us a quick background about you.
So I am, as you said in the intro, I'm an educator. I have a master's degree in education. I am a former high school English teacher. back in Philadelphia, where I'm originally from.
Mm-hmm.
Been in Chesapeake for about 13 years now, over 13 years. I work as a substitute teacher actively within Chesapeake Public Schools to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Picking up shifts here and there, mostly high school and middle school. That's where my wheelhouse is. But in addition to that, I'm the father of three. I have an 18-year-old, a 13-year-old, and an 8-year-old, and I'm still the primary caregiver at home. Part of the reason why I substitute instead of back into full-time teaching. And but while I've been home, as you also said, I'm a published author. My first middle grade fiction novel was published in 2011. Since then, I've had over a dozen publications, several
Wow.
full-length novels, short story collections, things like that I've had published. So um, but then I'm also very active as a volunteer, as an advocate and activist throughout the city. I have worked with CASA, the Court Appointed Special Advocates. I was a volunteer for that for years. I've continued educating. I've worked with nonprofits like Together We Can Foundation, which is based out of Virginia Beach, focusing on soft skills and education for people working on GEDs or
Mm-hmm.
going back to school, things like in that area. So that's kind of a specialty, the area that I like to work in as far as education goes. And then I'm also co-founded a nonprofit, Pride in the Peake, which is Chesapeake's Pride event in the month of June. We are unique in that we have the only local Pride event out of all Hampton Roads that is a family and youth focused Pride event with
Mm-hmm.
no adult themes, things like that. Something that it really matches Chesapeake as a brand. Chesapeake as a city, our biggest brand is about family. It's about community. It's about come here and raise your kids. So when we built a Pride event, we wanted to continue to work in that realm and focus on one that you could bring your whole family to. They're not going to see anything that they don't, they're not ready for. And to me, that's just an understanding of what our city is and what the city likes. We had over 3,000 people attend this year. So
Wow.
we know that this is the trajectory of our city. Our city is becoming more diverse. It's becoming younger. It's looking for leadership that understands the city as it is today and not
Mm-hmm.
the city as it was 15, 20 years ago. And
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
kind of goes into the next question of why I'm running. But
Oh yeah, no, I mean, but it's funny because I mean, I'm a born and raised. I consider myself a true Chesapeakean, right? And I see a lot of issues that I'm like, wow, this has to be dealt with. And then I see, growth as well, and that, I'm, proud of seeing exactly, it's slowly but surely, but we are growing. And I'll tease you a little bit because you named a lot of titles that you have. I see, hence why you're also a fellow bald man, because I'm sorry, I have a lot of titles too, and this hair just went away
yeah.
from me.
Oh
But
yeah, no, that made that call a while ago. That was years ago. As soon as it started going, I was like, nah, I'm not gonna be that guy
goodbye,
trying to
goodbye.
hold on to it.
There you go. There you go. There you go. But no, but that's awesome, Jeremy. And again, yes, tying into the next question, man. Why pursue running for a local office? Because it's just something that not everybody can. We bring it up in conversation because let's be honest. Like, I mean, as voters, as citizens, we always find a bunch of issues that, hey, look, I have an issue with that, but we never say, huh, I think I'll run for office and do something about it, because we don't want the headache. It's a lot. It's cutthroat. I mean, you think you have friends sometimes within politics, and really people within your own party, of course, opposing side too. But it's really a cutthroat field. So I'm very curious. Like, what made you want to say, hey, okay, look, I'm gonna pursue running for local office?
So you know, this is actually my second time running. I ran last year for Chesapeake School Board, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of what led into continuing, to run for the House of Delegates this year. But as with many people, oftentimes it's one or two specific issues that really get you engaged.
Mm-hmm.
As an educator, as somebody who was a CPS employee, um, we watched during the pandemic. We watched the decisions that our school board was making that we really didn't feel was in the best interest of teachers and students. And one of the biggest frustrations I had was when I started looking at who was on our school board and how we only had one and a half, I'll say, people at the time that I started looking into it that have ever actually worked in education. Our current school board as it
Mm-hmm.
stands right now only has one person who ever actually worked as an educator and administrator in the schools. Um, and
Wow.
that's kind of one of those things where you're like, man, somebody should do something about that. and then
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to look in the mirror and say, well, I'm somebody. Am
Yeah.
I in a position that I can do this? And yeah, not everybody can do it. It's not for everybody. It, I've known people that were more introverted that ran for office. I don't know how they do that. I'm an extrovert. I get energy from events and from talking to
Mm-hmm.
people. It's just who I've always been. Um, but yeah, there's always, to some degree, and I've talked to other candidates who try to claim that there's no ego. Like, oh, I don't have an ego. I'm like, well, for one, we all have egos, regardless. Where it
Mm-hmm.
comes in at can vary. Um,
That's
but there
true.
is a
That's true.
certain level of confidence you have to have in yourself, because really you're stepping up for a job interview for in front of tens and thousands of people and trying to convince
Yeah.
them why you're better than the other person. So
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have that confidence and that ego, you definitely don't belong in that realm. You're going to get hurt, really, or it's
Mm-hmm.
just going to be too much. It's going to be so stressful that you can't. And I've known some people that regretted running. I've known a lot of people that haven't. So um, but why I specifically wanted to run for this office was, after running for school board last year, and for those that don't know, in Chesapeake, our school board and city council are still citywide,
Mm-hmm.
which is a whole nother different ridiculous issue when we've got 260,000 people and 350 square miles, and our municipal candidates have to run the entire city,
Yeah.
unlike all of the other cities pretty much nearby. And Virginia Beach just recently got their ward system. But again, that's a whole different issue. But southern Chesapeake, which is where District 90 is, all of Great Bridge and Hickory, basically, from Great Bridge Boulevard down to the border with North Carolina is the district, and then from
Mm-hmm.
17 to the border with Virginia Beach. So it's a big district geographically because it includes all that rural and agricultural area.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing that I heard was really, like I said earlier, people are frustrated with the current representation. They don't think that the people that we have representing us now understand the city as it is now and what the city's needs are currently.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically in my district, a lot of people feel like the current delegate is more interested in protecting the interests of big businesses, the energy monopolies like Dominion and things like that, than they
Mm-hmm.
are actually about the everyday issues that people are upset about in the
Mm-hmm.
area, such as education funding, the reckless overdevelopment. We're losing a lot of our agricultural heritage in southern Chesapeake. I mean, you've been Chesapeake your whole life. I mean, Chesapeake used to be mostly agricultural,
Yeah.
and as it's going, we're just slowly losing it. And I was told the other day that Virginia Beach actually has more acreage of agricultural land than Chesapeake does now, because of how much has been rezoned for industrial and residential building. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the current people, a lot of people don't think that our current reps are trying to help with that and trying to stop that, slow it down, make at least, development's got to happen. Things
Mm-hmm.
are going to progress. That's just the nature of life. Um, but there are better ways of doing it. There are safer ways of doing it. There are less reckless ways. Um, and people feel like they're just worried about profits over people right now.
Got you, got you. And what's funny? I've said that many a times, just really in politics, because it's starting to be like a very greedy business, right? Okay, and you said it, money over morals in a sense. Now, as far as for okay, speaking on the agricultural, how Virginia Beach now has more land than Chesapeake, and originally Chesapeake, I believe, was leading, like
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned earlier. Would you say though, for say for the small businesses in Chesapeake, wouldn't it be somewhat beneficial when they do bring up, say a lot of buildings, like for example, I know there's, slowly developing like almost like a little town center kind of area over in Summit Point, things like that. Does stuff like that benefit? And if so, like if it didn't, like how would the like just if we had more just agricultural land, how would that, be beneficial for small businesses? Because I know that's kind of like the question that a lot of people
Yeah.
or voters are always asked about. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the first thing to remember, and a lot of people tend to forget this, farms are small businesses as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people think of small business, they don't think of a farm as a business. They think of it as
Got you.
like a separate class. And really, over 90% of the farms in Virginia as a whole are still smaller family-owned farms.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike a lot of other states and commonwealths, Virginia hasn't been overtaken by large corporate farming and things like like that. So that's one of the things that we're trying to preserve.
Gotcha.
But you're right. Again, we still do need to grow. We still need to do that with opportunity. Summit Point is a great example of, I think, it being done well. They took an
Mm-hmm.
area that was kind of an industrial park, really, in that center area of Greenbrier, and with an anchor like the Dollar Tree corporate headquarters, they were really able to build around that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's turning into an awesome thing. Great restaurants, an area that you can safely walk around and kind of
Mm-hmm.
park your car and chill. And I'm excited to see how that's growing, and I think that's going to be a great central thing. Um, what we're talking about preserving, though, is, and a lot of the building that we have in southern Chesapeake, it's being built residential, and
Mm-hmm.
that is the bigger problem. I mean, there's the 1,400 acres all the way down by the border that's being, they're turning into a big industrial park,
Mm-hmm.
um, and and again, sometimes those types of things are necessary, but they've got to be done right. You've got to account for, when you're building new residential and you don't account for how it's going to affect school overcrowding,
Mm.
because you build more houses, there's going to be more kids,
More
and
people.
in
Yep.
that area in southern Chesapeake, like Grassfield Elementary is already at about 150% capacity, I think,
Wow.
and
Wow.
they're
And that's a
projecting
large.
it
That's
to
a
get
very
even,
large school.
and that's all. I mean, and they've already built an extension on that school. There's
Yeah.
trailers outside the school to, I mean, and as they continue, so when like I said, building is necessary. We're going to have to
Mm-hmm.
build. We're going to have to expand. We got to modernize. We got to keep up with that. But when it's done in such a reckless manner, we don't account for the environmental impact.
Mm-hmm.
Chesapeake is got a lot of flooding issues in different parts of the city. Taking away additional green land and agricultural land adds to that. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
have somewhere if everything's concrete, there's nowhere for the water to go. Um,
Yeah.
so and things like like our recycling, for example. We lost recycling and as a curbside pickup option in the city last year, and part of that was we couldn't keep up with the needs of all of these new neighborhoods, new housing
Mm-hmm.
developments. So all of that does build into that. But what the other thing that I want to look at, and especially when again, I know you're more of an independent type of guy, and it's important to understand when the landowners that are farmers sell their land for development, we
Mm-hmm.
can't blame them for trying to make money off of what their property is.
Absolutely.
It's and some people like kind of want to penalize them or stop them from being allowed to do it. And that's not the right way to handle it. We don't want to
Mm-hmm.
tell a landowner it's their fault that farming isn't as profitable.
How dare you
But there are
choose to
things.
make more money for your family? I hate it. No.
Exactly. Or some of the areas that are looking to convert into solar farms in southern
Mm-hmm.
Chesapeake as well. I mean, the farmers, the landowners, they got to do the best they can to make money. It's their property. That's why you have it. That's why you own
Absolutely.
it, to make money off of it. But from a statewide level, if we were to engage better, there are ways that we can make the farming more profitable. Um, by tax abatements, things like that, property tax, like moratoriums. There's a lot of different ways that we can do that, where it would then be more profitable for it to stay a farm, and either that person farm it or sell it to somebody else who wants to farm it, but not somebody
Mm-hmm.
who's planning on just putting in a rezoning application for a residential development. But the reason that's so important is the impact on our local economy by being able to have agriculture in our own city. It reduces food costs. It
Mm-hmm.
can help reduce food deserts. When we have some places, you know, southern Chesapeake can feed northern Chesapeake. South Norfolk doesn't have farms, but it has a lot of people that need
Yeah.
food.
Yeah.
And the more we can be self-sufficient within that and have active, good farming techniques, the we can reduce food costs. We can reduce the food deserts. When we have to import everything from far away, costs rise.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there are benefits for that, and then there's the heritage aspect of maintaining a certain expectation of life. People that live in southern Chesapeake live there for a reason. They
Yeah.
like being in a more rural agricultural area, and the more that's taken away, the more people feel like they're losing the promise of what Chesapeake offered them. So that's a little
A
bit
lot
more
sounds
intangible.
familiar. A lot of promises being made, but nothing's ever. No, I mean, that's again a certain pattern that occurs. And I'm speaking as a voter. I think that's what
Hmm.
makes really politics. I think now a little more harder because a lot of people are just frustrated. Like people are just like overwhelmingly frustrated. I mean, how many times do we see random moments of road rage or arguments in the park, just around, like, why is everybody so frustrated? But it's just cost of living is, increasing. And like you're mentioning, people was given, it was a promise was made to them as like, look, this is my home, but now my home is technically like being taken away because you want to continue to make more money. But what about us? So I hear loud and clear what you're saying. We've hit on the education factor. We've hit on
Mhm.
the environmental. I want to talk about the civil rights protection that you have on, that you're one of your issues that you're fighting for. uh I know recently I've heard that, I believe, either 3 precincts for people to go vote for was taken away from them. So it makes, really, it makes it harder for certain areas to like vote, which is, I feel as though it's an unfair advantage because, and you're running, if it's okay if I can mention, you're running on the Democratic, as a Democratic candidate for the House of Delegates. And
No shame in
Chesapeake, in
that.
my,
I'm proud Democrat.
yeah, okay, so like Chesapeake, in my eyes, is very conservative. Now, I've heard otherwise. I've heard it's, fairly purple. I don't see the purple in it. I really, I mean, I of course I look on school board. I look on our council. I mean, one Democrat. We have, I believe, 9 people on council, 2 minorities, 1 Democrat. I think it's close to the same on the school board. I think 1 minority, but no Dem. And again, and what I'm saying, that, not saying that I'm a Democrat, but what I'm saying is I love to see, at least, let's be fair, right? Let's be reasonable. Not everybody in the city are very conservative, or Republicans. So it makes it difficult because it's like, I feel like they're doing that at a certain. I mean, what would you have to say about that, Jeremy?
So yeah, that's a twofold issue. One, the thing I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned earlier about the need for a ward system,
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the ways that we can get better representation. Like you said, there are 2 black members of city council, there's 1 black member of school board, but Chesapeake's 30% black. So when you have
Mm-hmm.
9 seats, you're looking at roughly 3 seats to have adequate representation.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, most of the city council and school board lives in the more central part of the city in Great Bridge or Greenbrier for the most part. There's only a
Mm-hmm.
couple
Mm-hmm.
that there's none from South Norfolk, none from Indian River. There's a couple in Western Branch, none from Deep Creek. I
Mm-hmm.
think 1 from Hickory. But other than that, the rest of them all live in that kind of centralized area. And it's the same problem that Virginia Beach had for the longest time, where all of the
True.
representation came from oceanfront interests, and that's because that's where the money was, and that's where they were able
Mm-hmm.
to get funded. And then they were then voting citywide, but everybody came from the same area, which means they were all representing interests in that area and not the rest of the city. So that would be
Mm-hmm.
one fix. Now that's going to be a hard fix because if city council won't voluntarily do it, which why would they? They benefit from the current system.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have to go through a legal process like Virginia Beach did, or some sort of state level process, kind of like what we had to do to move the local elections from May to November. That
Mm-hmm.
went through a state legislation. So there's ways that we can do it. But the other issue we have, and go into the feelings of voter suppression in certain areas, is directly so there was 2 locations that were removed from early voting this year that were available last year.
Mm-hmm.
The most prominent of them being Providence is the district. It's the Cuffey Center in South Norfolk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and anybody who knows the city knows that it is a strong predominant black part of our city. That
Mm-hmm.
is the community that is there. The problem with them, their argument for removing it was that it wasn't being used enough. But they only used the data from last year, which was an off-year election,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't look back multiple years to say, okay, well, what about in different years and in you know presidential years and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
yeah,
I
I
didn't mean
would
to cut you
definitely
off,
say
Jeremy.
that
When you
that's
when you
a
meant by
factor because yeah.
when you meant by
Okay.
usage, you're talking about voters. It was a low voter turnout with that. Is that what you
For
meant
early
by that?
voting, yeah, for how
For
many,
early voting, I got
yeah,
you.
for how many people actually went to that location for early voting. Their argument was that not enough people used it to justify keeping it open from a cost perspective. That was their on paper argument.
Got
um,
you.
but the problem is, and I agreed with Dr. Ella Ward, who is the one Democrat that is on city council. Her argument was, even if it's 100 more people, why wouldn't we want 100 more votes? Why wouldn't we, even if that's all it is, that's still, and it's we have poor transportation in the city. It's not like we've got strong public transportation or anything. So people that live in that area, it's harder for them to necessarily get to some of the other locations, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore they either have to wait till election day to try to vote, or the two Saturdays that we have, maybe they can get a ride or have some transportation. So to me, it's just fundamentally we should be making voting as easy as possible, you know,
Mm.
and as accessible as possible. And anything that we do apart from that, and nobody can argue anything about the integrity of Virginia's elections. Virginia has one of the strongest and safest election systems. We use paper ballots that can always be referenced as needed. It's not like everything's done on a computer and we don't have pieces of paper. Like we have both. It's counted by the computer, but we always have those physical papers, that we can reference back to. You have to have ID to vote, and if you don't, you can still vote, but then it becomes a provisional ballot that just needs some extra checking before it's counted. But
Mm-hmm.
you can still vote. So like, there's no reason to make it harder in Virginia when we have a system that has been, you know, nearly perfect, for years. We do elections right. We have strong election integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So expanding the vote should be our goal, not restricting it and making it harder for people to vote.
Got you. I want to speak on also, you're the co-founder of Pride in the Peak. Now, speak. I want to hear more about your nonprofit, because I think again too, and that's it's what am I trying to say? Chesapeake is very, and again, I just go based on my personal opinion
Yep.
about the city. In the city of Chesapeake is very pretty conservative. I mean, I feel like we have probably a church in every 5 seconds. We have churches on. It's six churches, five, and I say that just to say, the belief system, in Chesapeake. Do you think having that, does that, is it hard to kind of wake up or inform the citizens here in Chesapeake on the I'm losing my train of thought of the exact word, but you know where I'm trying to go with, as far as the message that you're bringing across with through your foundation, as well as what once you're in serving office as well too. So.
Yeah. So now, I mean, now it is important to note, and you know this from running multiple different organizations. Pride in the Peak
Mm-hmm.
is a 501(c)(3). So when
Mm-hmm.
I'm in that hat, it is non-political. It is
Mm-hmm.
nonpartisan. It is, the work that we're trying to do as a nonprofit. Um, but when we first started it, our first event was last year. When we were first
Mm-hmm.
starting it, that's what we were told. You can't do that in Chesapeake. You're going to have protesters. You're going to have problems. You're not going to, it's going to be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we did it real low key the first year. We didn't do a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot of advertising. We kind of just got it through the channels that we knew, within the community, and we had over 300 people show up, even with all of that. But more importantly, we had zero protesters. We had nobody showing up causing issues or complaining or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So when we built it bigger the following year, we were okay. We're going to be prepared because now we're expanding it. We're marketing it. We were reporting, doing it on the news to let people know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had over 3,000 people show up, and we still had no protesters, no problems, no
That's
issues.
awesome. That's awesome.
I think part of the reason we're successful in the city is, and my president Amber Bomer and I, we go to a lot of events to promote the work that we do,
Mm-hmm.
craft fairs and things like that throughout the community. And those are the conversations we have when we can tell people the style of events. So a lot of times people think of Pride, they think of Norfolk Pride Fest, they think of the big Pride events in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco or DC, and those are adult focused events. Those are
Mm-hmm.
events created for adults to have that inclusive space and being able to be proud of who they are, out loud and without hiding anything.
Mm-hmm.
But when we created ours and we specifically wanted to tailor it to family and youth, I think that's where we're finding acceptance, even within conservative members of our community. Because at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, conservative, liberal, whatever, all of us care about our kids, and all of us want our kids to be okay. So even conservative folks who don't understand or maybe still have some issues trying to work through some of the LGBT language or acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about kids and we're talking about how high the rates of suicide are amongst
Yeah.
LGBT youth, specifically 4 times higher, than a child that's not part of the LGBT community, um, people tend to soften up and are able to listen to the message and put
Mm-hmm.
their kind of personal feelings or whatever ickiness they feel about it, whether or not it's religious driven, personally driven, whatever, um, and see, okay, but you know what, we do want to create a safe space for our kids. We do want kids to feel like they're allowed to be who they are, and that messaging really has permeated across, political spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And we have had very few any events we go to. We've got our Pride in the Peak stuff. I mean, we're not hiding who we are or what we're promoting, and um, when we get some looks occasionally, but when we can have those conversations and we don't have it on a confrontational level, we try to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
We can then talk and we can make progress. And we don't expect everybody to walk away fully accepting everything from a
Mm-hmm.
conversation, but they can see that there's a difference in presenting this as a safe place for kids than promoting it as something that's more adult focused. And there's a lot of stuff that you would see at Norfolk Pride Fest that you wouldn't want to bring your kids to.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well, I
that's not
think
for them. That's it's for adults.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's very important that that you bring something like this up, because I feel as though for opposing sides, for good talking points for them, they always gonna bring up, look, there's children at drag shows, there's children at drag shows, and like you mentioned, okay, you have more adult related things, and then you have more family and and oriented things, and I do think this is very important, because at the end of the day, how is the message being brought up? I'll just, for example, at a drag show, right? How is the message being brought up if it's more of a party than actually, okay, we want to have a good time, but we also want you to please understand and follow the message where we're going, because look, we all struggle with the language, like you mentioned. I'll say it for myself. I struggle, and I have friends that are from the community, close friends and family, and I always have to correct myself, because I always ask, I'm like, wait, can I say that? Am I off a letter, or what is the
Mhm.
when do you want to be addressed by? Because the irritating thing is, people are so hesitant to change, right? And they have to remember that through time, change always comes. Gas prices are going to change, certain clothes trends are going to change, certain restaurant food, everything changes. But when it's like everybody has an issue with it, so I'm like, dude, just do your homework. It's okay to change, because the more you know, the more you grow in life. And that's always something I've always said: the more I know, the more I grow. If I have lack of that information, or if I just totally block that off, I'm not going to be really growing, because I'm going to get stopped one period. I'm gonna be like, wait a minute, wait, I didn't know about that. Well, I didn't do my learning. So it's like, you have to
Exactly.
continue to.
And I think it's important to, we yes, we grow and change individually, but we also collectively as a society grow and change. And one of the things, especially when we're talking about children within this realm, people that might be pushing back or feeling like, okay, things are different than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Mhm,
For example, we'll talk about, transgender issues, and I have my 18-year-old is transgender. And that was one of the reasons I got involved in some of the school board
mm,
stuff as they're targeting trans kids specifically. Um, some of the people, again, this also comes to trying to meet people where they are and understanding what their thought process. The perspective to some people is this is a new thing, and now
mhm,
it's trendy, and the kids just want to do it because other people are or whatever. Um, and I can understand that perspective, but when you step back and look at all of history and say, is this really a new thing, or is it becoming safer to be this person and this way more outwardly? And that's why we
mm,
see an increase of it in our culture. It's not that suddenly people are saying, "Oh, I want to be this," because we had a very similar thing. I remember growing up in the 80s and 90s, where gays and lesbians were becoming more prevalent and more culturally accepted, and that
mhm,
people said the same thing. How come everybody, now it's trendy to be gay? Everybody wants to be gay now, and it's like, no, they always were, and they always were throughout history.
mhm,
But 60 years ago, you would have killed them for it.
yeah,
So maybe they didn't talk about it openly, and now they can, and feel safer, and then it helps with their mental health. So it's important when I and that's one of those conversations we have with people who come back with that type of pushback. It's like, well, they're just doing this now because it's the cool thing to do or whatever. And I'm like,
mhm,
no. People start vaping because that's what the cool kids do. They don't change their
Oh,
gender.
do not get me started with the tobacco vape. If I
Yeah,
see another damn tobacco vape shop, it's like so many. Oh my gosh.
but again, that also comes from meeting people where they are. And if we want to make progress, we can't have people, especially people in elected office, who are
Hmm.
always ready to combat somebody who comes at them with a different perspective. We need to meet each other where we can meet and work from there. That's the only way we can get things done. And that's why, like you said, so many people are so frustrated with the dysfunction of our government right now, especially at the federal
Absolutely.
level. Um, Partially because of that, because we are so pushed to extremes on either side, that everybody else in the middle who just wants to live their life can't. And that it creates that kind of apathy, and the
Hmm.
disenfranchised people just feel like, why even vote? Like, doesn't matter what side I pick, they're both horrible. And that's that's sad, and that's a breaking down of our democracy when people feel that way. And that's one of the struggles we have in Chesapeake as well, that
Hmm.
because one party has dominated so strongly for over a decade now, people that might be more liberal or more progressive are disheartened and feel like,
Yeah.
well, why even bother? Because they're just going to control everything anyway, which
Yeah.
we need to overcome that by being out and proud Democrats as candidates running out there saying, look, there's Democrats in here too. Lots of progressive. And truthfully, in Chesapeake, and this is why I agree with people that say it's more purple, we got a lot of more independent, middle of the road people like you. A lot of people in the city are more there than they are on either extreme side.
Hmm.
And to that's where people want to live. And when you look at statewide, so you look at our municipal elections and our local elections, and everybody's Republican, with the exception of one.
Hmm.
But when you look at statewide elections, like when Senator Kane runs, Senator Kane wins Chesapeake, and
Yeah.
he's a Democrat. Senator Warner wins Chesapeake. Um, so Chesapeake will vote collectively as a city on the state elections and federal elections and vote for Democrats,
Hmm.
but and not have a problem with it. But then when we get to our local elections, we just don't have that same energy and that same passion, where we need to have strong candidates that are out there, that are visible in the community, and we're doing that. We're I believe we're heading in the right direction, and I think that it's
Hmm.
better for Chesapeake for both parties to be strong,
Yeah.
because then we get a mix, and we get people that can be from both sides and compromise and work together, and that's how government's supposed to work. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but you know we got this year, we got
Awesome.
next year municipal elections again. We'll see how that goes. So
Awesome. Awesome, man. Well, look, Jeremy, I have to ask why. Why should people vote for Jeremy Rodden?
the biggest thing is that I truly see public service as running for office as that, as a service, as somebody that's public. I feel, especially on the state level and even the local level, a lot of people in the city don't even know who their representatives are. They don't. They couldn't pick them out of a lineup. Maybe they'll
Hmm.
vote one way or the other because of a political affiliation, or it's who somebody told them to vote for. But the legislators that I admire, um, locally and throughout this city, folks like Delegate Jackie Glass in Norfolk, and Danica
Hmm.
Rome up in Prince William County. Part of the reason I admire them is because they are always working to be visible and accessible within their community, which allows them to be more effective to advocate for the community. So I've had people that I've talked to, even more conservative people who are excited to vote for me because they believe that about me. They
Mm.
believe that my goal is to actually represent the district that I'm in. Southern part of Chesapeake is where it's a little bit more conservative. I'm running as a
Hmm.
Democrat. I'm running I'm a proud liberal. Um, but what I've reminded people as well is my personal beliefs are part of what dictate the way I would legislate, the way I would vote. But I'm not there to represent me. I am one voter in this district. I am there to represent the entirety of the district. And I think the more we can do that, regardless of whether or not you're a Democrat or Republican, the better our process works and the more trust people will have in the system. If you feel like well, I'm a Democrat, but my legislator is a Republican, so I can't even ask them to help with something.
Mm,
If that's truly the reality of it, we're failing as a system. We don't just represent the people that voted for us; we represent the whole district, even people that voted against us. We still are there to represent them. So we've got to be public, we've got to be visible, we've got to be accessible. That's why I have everything on social media. you know, I refuse to call it X too. I only call it Twitter. I don't accept it. It's Twitter.
yeah,
Um, but
you haven't made that change yet. You haven't gone with
nope,
that change yet.
nope. I, I'm not. I don't accept it. But I think that's important. I think it's important that we're engaging, that we are willing to have people ask us questions, and being able to answer the hard questions.
Yeah.
And not just when we sit in corners with people that already agree with us. That's back to you said about growth. We never grow. We
Hmm.
never change if we're not challenged.
Yeah.
And as a legislator, as an elected official, I think that's part of the job, is to be challenged. You can't just hide in a corner and say, well, I'm just with my people that agree with me, because that's not how progress works. So
Absolutely. And it's funny, I tell a lot of people, like, I have a slew of friends that majority, I'm pretty sure of the time, we do not all agree at all. And I think that's the fun part, because that's how we each kind of grow off of each other. We learn a little bit from, like, majority of my friends. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I have, conservative friends, I have liberal friends, I have, same that align with my beliefs, and then I have people that are total opposite. I mean, it's family friends. It's just, and that's how I continue to learn. I learn off conversation. I rarely, I should read books more, but I read based off of people. I learn a lot through, through conversation and through individuals. Another quick question I would like to ask Jeremy before I get you off. Uh, why, if an individual, if a voter says, "Hey, look, I'm tired of the whole pattern uh thing going on when it comes to politics, when it comes to politicians as well, and I really don't think my vote counts. So I'm not even gonna try. I'm gonna just give up on." What do you have to say to that individual? Because I always love to bring up that question. I'm 28 years old. I have people that are my age and younger, and even 18, or just even older people. They don't know. They're not aware when it comes to local office. They don't know anything when it comes to that. They don't choose to at all either. Why is it very important? Why, what can you say to an individual like them and say, "Hey, look, come on."
yeah, it's hard to overcome, a lifetime of feeling disappointment and stuff
Yeah.
like that in a single conversation. But especially when we talk about local, what especially people that maybe people that vote every presidential year but don't vote every other year in between.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a big chunk of the people that we try to get to, because clearly they understand the process on a national level, and why it's important. But what I try to remind people is local office affects your daily life more
Mm.
than the president ever will. When we talk about losing recycling in Chesapeake, that was a local issue, a local decision by our city council. If we had different people up there who were willing to negotiate differently, maybe that would have went a different way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so when we look at how our city is run, whether or not my trash get picked up on time is way more important than whatever nonsense those guys up in Congress and DC are talking about right now.
Yeah.
Whether or not, you know, I've got, safe streets and things like that. That's all run on the local level. Our police
Yeah.
and our sheriffs and so, that's all local. The funding from that comes from local. So the what I try to tell people the inverse. If you're only going to vote, you know, in one election, the local election is the most important one to vote in.
Mm-hmm.
President's going to be decided by everybody across the country, but the smaller level we're voting at, the more power your vote has, because
Mm-hmm.
you are one of 35,000 instead of one of 3 million. So if you really want your vote and voice to count, and then the important thing is, in the old adage is, if you don't vote, you can't complain. I mean, that's not true in this country. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can always complain. That's First Amendment right there. But but it's true though, because the more you engage in the process, the more you understand about it, and the more you can affect it to benefit your needs and your community's needs. um, and Chesapeake does a pretty decent job of that. We have a lot of good civic leagues that get involved and focus on things, completely nonpartisan organizations that are just focusing on the needs of a community. um, but we need to do more of that, because the more people that vote, the more we hold these elected officials accountable, the more they're forced to represent everybody. Um, it, the other kind of cliche line is that decisions are made by the people who show up,
Mm,
and
mm,
if you're not one of the people showing up, you're not helping direct things the way that you want them to go. So it does matter. Every vote does matter. And I give an example, especially on a House of Delegates level. We've got a
mhm,
great one a couple of years ago. I think it was 2017, up in on the peninsula. Uh, we literally had an election that was decided by picking a name out of a hat, because it was a dead tie. Even after recounts, it was exactly tied. They
yeah,
literally
I
picked
remember
the
that.
name
I
out of the
remember
hat.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, current delegate Shelley Simons was on the losing end of that. She won 2 years later and took that seat back
Mhm,
properly. But that's how much a single vote counted, and it was even extra important because that was the 50 split of our House of Delegates hinged on that race too. So not only was we were at a tie on that race, we were at a tie in the House of Delegates, where control went to the Republicans instead of the Democrats. And that's 2 years of policy that could have been done differently. So for those
mm.
of us that are on my side, that hurt. That we lost 2 years of potential progress in my perspective, in our perspective, because of that. So yeah, one vote can matter, and it's recent, and it's happened, here, and you know the greater Hampton Roads area. It's a real. So
Hey, hey, look, folks, you heard it here. That look, one vote can really make a huge difference, and your vote matters. So please, please, please be sure to vote come November 4th. I know early voting, I believe, is still happening right now. Jeremy, how can people continue to follow, support your campaign as well? How can they stay tuned and stay in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm active on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. My website is just jeremyrodden.com. You can get to all my socials from there. I make myself real easy to find. If you Google my name, Jeremy Rodden, you will. That's the first thing that's going to pop up. I am the Jeremy Rodden as far as Google's concerned. Yeah, there's plenty of ways to follow and support, see what I'm doing. Donations through my website are available. And yeah, and like you said, early voting is still active. Right now, it is just Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 at the registrar's office at 411
Mm,
Cedar Road. Starting on October 23rd, some of those satellite locations will open up in other parts of the city, in Indian River and Western Branch and Deep Creek, and then the Central Library as well on Cedar. Um, and then that 2 weeks is the last 2 weeks of elections. Also, Saturday voting will be available those two Saturdays. Um,
mm.
and that's I know important for a lot of people who work during the week, can't quite get to one of those locations. If you still want to vote early, you can go to any of the locations and vote early. You don't have to go to the location that's closest to you. You can any location for early voting, doesn't matter where you live in the city. So we'll get out those two Saturdays, and then November 7th is the last day. And that's when we'll see where the chips fall.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Jeremy, again, I truly appreciate it, my friend, taking the time out your busy schedule, coming here on the pod. Look, y'all, Jeremy and I, we're gonna chop it up a little bit. Once this is over, again, I thank you so much for tuning in to another great episode of the Arrington Gavin podcast, coming to you with new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. Again, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time via podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, our YouTube channel, our Smooth Club Media. Subscribe, hit the like button. Also, our Facebook page, our Smooth Club Podcast. And also, don't forget to your boy hosts a weekly radio show every Sundays at 12 p.m. on WNSB 91.1 FM in your city, hosted by yours truly, along with my good friends. I have comedian Ciroc Fox with me, and then my sister, Hustle Queen herself, Miss Michelle Young. Tune into us every Sundays at 12 p.m. If you're not in the Hampton Roads area, no worries. If you can't find us on your radio dial, you can listen to us live online, WNSB.org, or download the free app, WNSB app, anytime. Y'all take care. I will see you guys next time on the Arrington Gavin podcast. We are out.